Imagine this, your Roblox game filled with jaw-dropping assets. Trees, buildings, props that no one else has. The secret to making that happen? Mastering Blender. In this video, I'm going to teach you how to take control of your creative power, step by step, even if you've never touched 3D software before. By the end, you won't just understand Blender, you will feel unstoppable because you'll be able to make anything you want. So have you ever wanted your game to stand out, but didn't know how to make professional quality assets? Or maybe Blender looked intimidating with all those buttons and panels. Well, stick with me and I will show you why it's not just easy to use Blender, it's fun. Plus, we're gonna create something cool together that you can use in your game immediately. So here's the plan. First, I'm gonna walk you through downloading and setting up Blender. Then we're gonna break down the interface so that it feels like second nature. You're gonna learn the essential controls, how to create a simple low poly tree asset and export it to Roblox. And don't worry, I'm gonna keep things straightforward. So if you're serious about leveling up your Roblox game development skills, this is your sign to go all in. Let's build something amazing together. All right, so first we gotta download Blender. And the cool thing about Blender is that Blender is a completely free software, but it's incredibly powerful. It is one of the best 3D modeling softwares ever created. And you can make literally anything in it, from the simplest low poly bush to a massive kingdom. But for our purposes in Roblox development, we're gonna start by learning how to make simple assets. So let's download Blender now. Go ahead to blender.org. You can click the link in the top of the description to visit Blender right now. And then you're gonna see this. And I want you to click download right below the title of the latest version. Don't worry, if you're watching this in the future after Blender 4.3, everything stays 99% the same, and this tutorial is gonna work for you no matter what. So click download, then check that it's the right type of file for your system. So for me, I'm doing this on a Mac with Apple Silicon. So it got my version right, but you wanna make sure. If it isn't the right version, you can go ahead and click this and you can grab the correct one for your system type. So go ahead and click download and it's gonna download to your system. From there, you'll want to open the file that gets downloaded to your computer and go through the install process. All right, so once you install Blender on your system, go into the Blender app. From there, you're gonna see this panel. You can go ahead and click save on this. Don't change anything. And then you can click general, or you can just click back here and it'll open a new general file, just a normal blank file. You'll see here that you will have the default cube spawned in and selected in Blender. The default cube is famous. It's a hallmark of Blender. It's something that every model you start with, you're gonna see. So let's go over what you can see here. So this area that you can view through is called the 3D viewport. This is your playground. Everything you model, texture, and tweak happens right here. This is called the outliner. Think of it a bit like the Explorer panel in Roblox Studio if you're familiar with it. It lists every object in your scene so that you can stay organized. Then we have the properties panel down here. This is where magic happens. Materials, modifiers, and all the tools you need are right here. Then we have the timeline. So we won't use it much today, but it's great for animating if you wanna learn how to do that later. Look around the interface, get comfortable. You don't need to master it all right now. Just follow my lead and piece by piece, it will all click into place for you. So Blender is all about speed and flow. So let's lock in the key commands. So first is your middle mouse click. If you're using a mouse right now, if you go ahead and press and hold the middle mouse, you're gonna look around the viewport like I am right now. If you're using a trackpad like me on Mac, you can just use 2 fingers to slide around. Next is G. So G is how you move objects or vertices. So if you press G, you can go ahead and move this object around and then click to confirm. We can hit Command or Control Z on our keyboard to undo that. Now, something cool about Blender is that when we hit G and move, we can actually right click instead to cancel the operation and put it back where it was. You'll see that Blender has a lot of these very cool features that make using it a lot simpler and snappier than you'd expect. It's a very fun program to use because it's just so easy and magical. So let's continue learning how to use this amazing piece of software for ourselves. So the next thing I'm going to show you is the S command. S lets you scale selections up and down. Now left click and right click do the same thing here. When you left click, it will confirm, and when you right click, it will cancel. Next is R, same thing. Left click to confirm and right click to cancel the operation. So as you're using the 3 modes that I just showed you, you'll have times where you find that using it as it is doesn't really work how you want, okay? And don't worry, there's a way to fix this. So by default, the way that rotation works is that it follows where you are looking at it from in the viewport. And this isn't always what we want, right? And the same thing happens for scale. Scale by default is uniform, right? And that also isn't always what we want. And finally, move is also based upon how we're looking at it in the viewport. And it's moving on every axis. So what do we do to move, scale, or rotate on one axis at a time, X, Y, or Z, and also rather than basing it on where we are positioned in the viewport? Well, it's very easy. So go back to scale, move, or rotate. You can use any of them, and just click Z, X, or Y on your keyboard, and it will move upon any one of those axes. So if you click R, and then click Z, it'll move along the Z axis, which is up and down. If you click R and then Y, it'll move along the Y axis. If you click R and then X, it'll rotate upon the X axis. Cool stuff, right? And this applies to every single mode. So S, Z, and it'll scale on the Z axis. S, Y, and it'll scale on the Y axis. So I've shown you the basic ways to manipulate objects in Blender, but this is not everything, right? You probably are thinking, well, if this is all Blender is, it's not very good. What's the difference between this and Roblox Studio or my game engine or whatever I want to use, right? Well, this is not the whole story, okay? So Blender actually has 2 main modes. The mode that we are in right now as you're looking at Blender and following along with me is object mode, okay? Object mode is where we can kind of move around objects, add in things that you're gonna see up here inside of the outliner. But if we wanna edit one of these individual objects, we have to go into edit mode. So the way to enter edit mode is to click tab when you have an object selected. And from there, you'll be able to edit the vertices, which are these little dots, right? Points in 3D space, that's what a vertex is. And you'll also be able to edit the edges and the faces. So I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. But you're probably getting very excited at this point because you can see that Blender is very powerful. And there's so many ways that you can use it to create very unique things. And you can experiment with different variables in the equation to kind of make a concoction of your own. Blender is just an amazing program, and I can't wait to show you even more. So stick around for the rest of this video so that you can master Blender with me one step at a time. Because I promise you, it will change your Roblox career forever. All right, so the cool thing about the keybinds that I showed you is that you can use them in both object mode and edit mode to change your objects to look how you like. So I'm gonna select one vertex and click G, all right? And you're gonna see that it moves. But you're gonna notice that you have a lot more power when you're in edit mode. Edit mode allows you to edit individual vertices and add a lot of detail to your objects that just isn't possible in object mode. All right, let's go over a few important things to understand about 3D modeling in Blender. In the top left, you'll see a menu that lets you select vertex select mode, edge select mode, or face select mode. So these coincide with the keybinds 1, 2, and 3 on your keyboard. So you'll see that if you click 1, 2, or 3, it'll swap between each mode. If you click 2, you'll see you can select an edge. Pretty cool, right? If you hold shift, you can select multiple edges. Now let's hit 3 and try moving around a face. If we click and hit G, we can move around each face on our cube. Cool, right? So now you know how to move around any part of your object. You're already starting to see your Blender skills improve. So imagine how far you'll get if you watch this video until the end. Let's keep going. All right, so now that you know the basics of object mode and edit mode in Blender, it's time to make our first asset. We're going to create a low poly tree, and when we finish this up, I'm going to show you how to import it into any game or project you're making on Roblox. So next step is we're going to hit tab to go back to object mode. After that, click on the cube in its weird shape that we just turned it into, and we're going to delete it. So click X and then click delete, and that'll delete your cube. Now we're going to add a new object. And this time, we're not gonna add a cube, we're gonna add in a cylinder so that we can make the base of our tree. Hit Shift A, and then go down to Mesh, and then choose Cylinder. Now, do not click anywhere else. This is very important because we have a menu down here that will allow us to make this more simple and remove the amount of polygons that it has. You'll notice it has a lot of faces by default, and that's not gonna look right on a low poly tree. So you can click this drop down and then go to the vertices and choose the amount that you want. So I'm gonna turn it down to 10 vertices. That'll give us a nice, well-rounded low poly tree that kind of shows the polygons, but also has a bit of detail to it as well. Now, hit tab and go back into edit mode. From there, click 3 on your keyboard to go into face select mode. Then hit S and hit G and then Z. Let's move that down a little bit. Now we're gonna extrude this. This is basically gonna extend it out. Click E to extrude, move your mouse up, click to confirm, and there you go. You just extruded the part of your trunk. Now we're gonna hit S to scale, and then we're just gonna extrude this one last time. Hit E to extrude, and then S to scale. There we go. Let's hit tab to kind of look at this, and it's looking pretty cool, right? Now, something we can do is we can go to edge select mode by clicking 2, and then we can click Shift Z on our keyboard. This will let us go into X-ray mode, which is a way to see through our object and select through our object. So I'll show you what that means right now. Click and drag a box around one of these little circles in the trunk of our tree. And now if you hit G, you're gonna be able to move around different parts of the tree. You might wanna add a little bit of kind of movement and maybe a little bit of rotation as well to vary your tree a bit and make it look a bit more natural. But you don't have to do this, it's just a stylistic touch I personally want to add. So click R to rotate that, and there we go, looking a lot better. So now I'm gonna go down to the bottom here, I'm gonna select this, I'm gonna click R again, and there we go. So it's looking more natural on the trunk. I'm actually gonna go to the side panel here. You'll see we have a lot of different tools. Down here, I'm gonna go down to the smooth tool. I'm gonna press and hold, and I'm gonna drag to randomize. You can actually randomize your vertices a little bit with this, which can make it even more varied. You'll only wanna do a little bit. You'll see if you do too much, it's gonna screw everything up, so be very careful with this. Just a super subtle touch to add to your tree. Yeah, so it doesn't look perfect, but I think that's okay. So one thing we can do before we move on to making the branches and the leaves in a second here is we can move around these segments of the trunk and choose where we want them to be. So you can do this by clicking G twice. So click GG, GG, and there we go. Now you can kind of slide these edges along the trunk, which is really neat if you ask me. All right, finally, let's make some simple branches. So go ahead and click E to extrude on the top here, and there we go. Now we're gonna do Shift Z, click 2 to use edge select, and then drag over this. So we do run into kind of a funny issue here when we extrude this, right? Because now, well, what do you do to make the next branch? Well, we just do this. We just select this, and then you can click extrude. You'll want to select this, but don't extrude straight out from it. The reason is that it's gonna be kind of lopsided. It's not gonna look exactly how you want. So the way to fix this is to duplicate these edges instead. Click Shift D, and then go up a little bit, or down, and just click. Then rotate it into the position you want the branch to start from, maybe scale it a bit too, and then after you're ready, click E to extrude it outward. Now it's gonna be nice and uniform, and it's gonna look how you want, rather than being all lopsided. You'll notice that at the edge of this, the face isn't gonna show up. This is because what we extruded from only had edges. It didn't have a face made. There's a simple fix for this. Click F on your keyboard and you can turn it into a face instantly. problem solve. But it isn't actually necessary to have a face there. You can do it if you want, but in general in 3D modeling, we want to have as few faces as possible. So I would delete that. I'd even delete this one. So you can click X and then only delete the face. I'd also do that on the bottom of your tree as well. Cool, so make a few more branches and then we'll move on to making the leaves. So we can go ahead and duplicate this. Go ahead and go into face select, hit Shift Z to go into X-ray mode and select the middle of this to select all the faces. From there, we'll want to click Shift D and then rotate it on the Z axis. And we'll want to look at this straight on from the very top of our object to position it. So you can go up here to actually change the position to look straight down directly at the object by clicking this. You can click the top Z-axis bubble here, and there you go. And we can position that nicely in there. Then from there, we'll rotate just a little bit on the X-axis, and maybe on the Z. We'll kind of put this over here. Make it look nice and balanced. There we go. So this will work for demonstration purposes. You can add as many branches as you want. You can make this however you like. You can even add subdivisions to these branches by clicking Control R or Command R on Mac and then clicking, and you can scroll up and down to change the amount of subdivisions. And these will kind of make a split inside of your branch, and you can kind of make the branches a bit more bent, which is neat. It gives a good look, but not what I'm going for. I want to keep things simple for what I'm doing here. All right, so the final step, since we were doing some extruding on some edges, it's very important that you make sure that your normals are correct. This is something you're gonna have to do a lot in 3D modeling. Your normals are basically which way the faces are pointing. So the funny thing about 3D modeling you're gonna find is that sometimes you'll make an asset, you'll import it into Studio, and it will look weird. The faces will be reversed and it'll be kind of see-through. It's really weird, but it's easy to prevent this. So the first thing we want to do is we want to change our view so that we can see which way the normals are pointing. So go up to this drop down right here, choose face orientation, and you'll see that some of these normals are pointed the wrong way because we extruded out from some edges rather than faces. So the normals didn't really know which way to point and they went the opposite way. So if we were to import this into Roblox Studio, as you can see on screen, everything will be reversed and it won't look how you want. Keep this in mind when you're 3D modeling. Always make sure that you check your face orientation before you export and recalculate normals if needed. So just click A and then click Alt N or Option N on Mac and go ahead and choose Recalculate Outside. And you'll see that your normals will be made how you want them. Now, it might not always be that simple. You might need to use some of these other options sometimes. You can watch other videos on that if need be, but usually Recalculate Outside is gonna have your back. All right, I'm going to show you how to make your leaves. So click Shift A. Let's add in an icosphere. As it says in Blender, it's a spherical mesh that contains equally sized triangles. Basically, it looks nice and low poly. Of course, down here in the corner menu, if you don't click away, you will see the subdivisions option. You can change how many subdivisions you want. It's very neat. So I'm gonna do 2, leave it at the default. You could even increase it if you want. And I'm just gonna move it up here, right? Hit G, kind of move it around. Hit S to scale, and this is the fun part, right? This is exciting because you get to move around these leaves and make them how you want. You can hit Shift D to duplicate and S to scale. Looking cool, right? Well, I think this is looking a bit too tall. I mean, height is good. I'm 6 foot. I like having height, but for a tree, sometimes it's not so good. So let's move this down. Here we go. All right, much better. This isn't the savannah. We don't have giraffes eating out of these trees, so we're all good. So now you might be wondering, how do you kind of make these a little bit more deformed? Or you might like the style they look in right now, right? It's up to you. You have the creative freedom here to choose how you want your tree to look. But I'm definitely gonna kind of adjust these. So I'm gonna click 3 to go to face select. I'm gonna click O on my keyboard to do proportional edit mode. And you're gonna love this. So if you click G in proportional edit mode, it will actually move vertices around what you have selected with it. It's really cool. It's nice for making things like clouds and bushes and trees like what we're creating right now. And there's even more use cases for it, and you'll figure them out as you use Blender more. So if you click G, you'll see this circle, right? And that shows kind of the area that it's gonna affect around it. So just scroll up and it's gonna allow you to grab more of it, okay? And adjust more of it at a time. Isn't that cool? So now we'll kind of grab another face down here. And something you might want to do is you might want to combine these. If you go back into object mode by clicking tab, you can actually hold shift and select all of these and then click Command J on your keyboard to join them all together. Cool, right? In object mode, something I didn't show you yet is modifiers. These let you add modifiers to your object, which kind of manipulate how the objects look. Go into the modifiers panel and you're gonna be really excited when you see what this does, okay? So go ahead and click Add Modifier and then go down to Remesh. You'll see this kind of combines them together. It's a bit too high poly right now, so we're gonna turn up the voxel size. And this kind of makes this blob, right? Isn't that neat? Now, of course, you're gonna wanna adjust this inside of edit mode in a second here, but man, isn't that neat how it does that? So, yeah, you can mess with these settings, do adaptivity. You can also do smooth shading right here if you want. I'm gonna show you how to do that manually afterwards, so I wouldn't choose that option, but it's up to you. Yeah, there's other options too, right? There's sharp. And you'll see some of these kind of adjust our normals in a way we don't want. Avoid using those or make sure that it isn't doing that. Smooth is kind of cool. Blocks. You making a Minecraft type game? Well, this is the one for you, huh? Oh no, I turned that up too high. I'm gonna freeze my computer, huh? I turned it up way too high. Whoa. Well, that's what the M4 Max does on the new Mac. So if you want a powerful computer, I guess go for that. Oh crap. Now it's doing it again because I'm leaving edit mode. All right, be careful with what you do in Blender, especially if your computer is not an M4 Max, which most are not at that level. Be very careful what you do because you can crash your computer with very high GPU load operations like that. Okay, so I'm definitely going to turn that down. We're gonna go to voxel. So voxel looks good to me. And we'll just, put it on a amount that you like, and then we'll start adjusting it within edit mode and see what happens. All right, so after you like the way that it looks, you can apply a modifier and make it permanent by clicking Command A while having the modifier selected. So select the modifier, click Command A, and there you go. I also added a triangulate modifier. Makes it look a little bit better. So I'll also apply that. It's in Generate Triangulate. Now what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna fix some of the abnormalities. I'm gonna click M to merge some of these vertices. So you can just select them, click M to merge, and it'll be good to go. So now we're gonna mess with Shade Smooth, as I promised you earlier. You can right click and you can click Shade Smooth to shade it smooth, but we're actually not gonna do that. We're gonna use Auto Smooth. Kind of lets you adjust how smooth it is. So that may look better if you didn't end up doing what we just did, which was add that modifier on. You can see how that kind of adds a nice effect. So the Auto Smooth wasn't quite looking how I want, so I'm actually gonna make it shade smooth, and I'm gonna do custom sharp edges. So this is something you can also do if you did the voxel modifier. So I'm gonna go into edit mode. I'm just gonna select some edges here and then click Control E and click Mark Sharp. That'll go ahead and make that edge sharp. And there we go. So you can kind of add in some of your own sharp edges, kind of add that nice stylistic touch to it. But of course, you might be thinking, well, I really just want a super low poly tree. I want that super low poly look. And you might not even be doing any kind of smoothing at all, and that's okay. You can just skip this section and go to the part where we start texturing this. All right, cool. So the final thing I want to do is I would like to kind of smooth out our trunk. So let's just shade Auto Smooth and turn it down, turn it up, see how it looks. There we go, and it looks good at about that amount. So we've done quite a bit here, right? I'm sure that it's exciting to have just modeled your very first thing in Blender. Congratulations. Now it's time to texture it, and then we'll be exporting it into Roblox Studio. Imagine how cool it will be to see it in your game or your project. You'll be able to use it. You'll be able to place these trees all over the place and make maps out of it. Let's go. All right, now I'm going to share with you how to texture your model. and then we're gonna import it into Roblox Studio so you can put it in your game or project. Before we do that though, I gotta explain something to you. When you model something in Blender, you can choose whether you want to just export it as is, right, with these two separate parts, and then color it in Roblox Studio like you would with normal parts, or you can decide if you want to texture the model in Blender. So if you're going to color it in Roblox Studio, I recommend exporting this as separate parts so that you can color each thing individually. But if you're going to texture it in Blender, I actually recommend that you join the two together. So first, make sure that you apply any modifiers that you have on your objects so that they don't apply to the whole thing when you join them together. So just go select and then check your modifiers panel and click Command A on any of them that need to be applied. So all mine are applied. Now I'm going to select both of these, click Command J, and bang, there we go. Now that we've done that, it's all one model. The next step is to go to UV editing mode in Blender. Now we're going to kind of turn our viewport around so we can see this right. So this panel will basically show you how you're gonna map the texture onto your model. There's a lot of different ways to do this, and I'm gonna show you a really basic way today, but you can look into this in other videos to learn more about how to texture your models in more advanced and different ways. So go to the description, you gotta download a color palette that we're gonna use to color our model. You don't have to use one of these, but it's a good way to get colors. It's popular, and it even has gradients. So if you want it to be textured as gradients, I know that RoBuilder likes to use that style a lot, you can do that. I'm just gonna leave mine pretty much as just solid colors, but useful to have this color palette as it works out really nicely. So we're gonna use this up here to kind of select the view by which we want to UV unwrap this. So it looks like my model's kind of flipped, so that's not right. I'm gonna click Shift Z and I'm just gonna hit RX 180 and that'll flip it around, okay? So that's a cool thing about Blender I didn't tell you earlier, is that you can actually not only rotate objects and rotate them on a specific axis, you can also choose the amount of degrees by which you rotate that object. So again, I clicked RX and then 180 degrees just by typing 180 on my keyboard. Cool, right? So something to keep in mind there. By the way, if you hold Shift and middle mouse button, you can move kind of more horizontally and vertically, rather than looking around the entire object in every different direction. All right, the first step to texture our mesh is to select it and then go down to the Materials menu. Then click New. Then we're gonna click this yellow dot here and change the base color to an image texture. From there, just open and then grab the file that you just downloaded from the description. And as a reminder, just go to the description and download that file and you'll be able to insert it into Blender. So go ahead and open that up. Now we're gonna press Tab to enter edit mode. From there, you'll see the texture actually populate over here. Now the next step is to UV unwrap our model, which is gonna place the faces that we select in our mesh onto the UV unwrapping area so that we can start to map out where we want our textures to go on the mesh. I'll show you how right now. And one thing I forgot to do is to go into the mode where we can see our textures, to change the shading of the viewport. So change it to show the material. That's this third option right here. And there we go. You might have to extend this out so that you can actually see these options up here. All right, so we're going to select the trunk here. So just go in here and use the face select mode to select just the trunk. You can do that by box selecting these little circles. And then if you accidentally select part of the tree, just hold Shift and click on that face to deselect it. Once you have only the trunk selected, we're gonna click U on our keyboard and then choose Project from View. That's gonna unwrap just the trunk onto our UV editing screen. So then from there, you can go ahead and move this around with the normal Blender controls. I'm gonna place this right here on a nice brown color, make it really small so it's just a solid color and not a gradient. Next, we're going to select the tree leaves. And you might be thinking, that's gonna be hard. What if I select the trunk on accident while I'm doing it? Well, you're in luck, because you can simply click Control-I or Command-I on Mac in order to select inverse, which basically means select everything that is not already selected. So we're gonna go ahead and scale this down and place it on the green. I'm gonna place it right here, kind of on a little bit of a light green, just make it extremely small so there's no gradient, right? Because we don't wanna pick up this gradient, unless you want that style, right? And that's the cool thing about this texture that we are using. It gives you choice. So if you wanna see your tree in action, make sure to turn off wireframe mode so we can actually look at it in the viewport. And man, isn't that a beauty? That is a beautiful looking tree, man. Oh my goodness. Fix some of these vertices sticking out. All right, let's see here. Because this is your first model and it looks great. I know this looks better than my first low poly tree. So congratulations on making your first model. It is time to export it. So let's go back to the normal modeling tab right up here. And then let's make sure that everything looks right and that the normals are correct, so that, again, as I told you earlier, so that the normals aren't flipped. So go ahead up here into the viewport overlays menu to check on that. And it looks good on my end, but if you have any red, right, you'll just want to go into edit mode, click A, and then click Alt N or Option N on Mac to then recalculate outside, right? And if part of it turns red when you do that, you'll just want to kind of select the part that needs to be fixed, and you can go ahead and make sure that each part of it is correct. All right, let's export this bad boy. So click File, Export, and then choose FBX. You can also export as OBJ. I'll explain to you these file types in just a moment. So as you're opening up your file menu and saving your awesome model that you just created, you want to keep in mind a few settings every time you export from Blender. So first is limit to selected objects. So you'll see that you can actually still select things while you have the file explorer open here. And the cool thing is we can actually only export things that are selected. So say that you're working on a full-on low poly model pack full of all the models you're gonna use in the simulator you wanna create. You can select certain ones within your Blender file that you would like to export to Roblox Studio, rather than selecting everything all at once. All right, next thing to keep in mind is the file type. There's two file types that people who model on Roblox typically use when they export assets to Roblox Studio. The first one's OBJ. OBJ is a lot more simplistic, doesn't really allow you to export textures in the same way, and it's a lot more limited. FBX, on the other hand, is the one that I prefer to use. If you're exporting a model that you have textured in Blender, it'll export them with the file, everything will import perfectly, and it just works a lot better in my opinion. Also, a key difference to understand is that OBJ files will export everything combined, and it will all import into Roblox Studio as one object, which is not very useful if you're exporting, say, an entire pack of models. If you want everything to be separate, it is important that you use FBX when you export models, all right? There you go. Now you know most of what you need to keep in mind for exporting things from Blender to Roblox Studio. So make sure your file's in a good location and click Export FBX. All right, next, go to Roblox Studio. You want to make sure that you publish your project to Roblox. So go ahead and hit File, Publish, and then I'll just name this Blender Test. All right, from there, we're going to go to View, and then make sure that you have Asset Manager open. Then just click this bulk import button right here, go to your file, open it, and then it'll give you three options right here. I would leave these two on. I would leave this unchecked 99% of the time, but you can keep this in mind if you want to import an FBX file as one mesh, which sometimes you might want to do that. All right, click apply. All right, awesome. Now that you've done that, it should show up right here and you will be able to add it into your game. Isn't that amazing? So that's your first model. Good work today in creating that. Imagine taking this tree and using it to create an entire map with a beautiful landscape and anything else you can imagine. And now that you've watched this guide till the end and created this asset, you're now a modeler with Blender skills. You have gone from zero to Blender hero. You've learned the interface, mastered the essential shortcuts, created a custom asset, textured it, and imported it into Roblox. Now that you know the basics of Blender, you can experiment. The sky's the limit, and there's tons of tutorials out there that you can use to learn how to make anything you want in any style. So I can't wait to see how far you go in your journey as a modeler. Think about how much further you can go now that you have this skill. Subscribe now to get more Roblox game development tutorials, modeling tutorials, and more all the time, and click the video on screen to learn some advice that will help you to master your Roblox building and modeling skills even further. And by the way, you can join Scripting Secrets below, my course on Roblox game development, scripting, and more that will help you to expand on your abilities in development. See you later.